Hello everyone, Professor Philip Travis here, and this week we're going to be looking at the Cold War, really the height of the tensions of the Cold War, and how it affected American society in the 1950s. The expansion of the arms race, the nuclear arms race, tension over areas like Berlin, of course in the late 40s with the Berlin blockade and the Berlin airlift, increasing tensions surrounding events like the Korean War, the fall of China to communism, of course, rising tensions with the Soviet development of the atomic bomb, and then the American Soviet developments of the so-called super or hydrogen bomb, the first thermonuclear device. These events in the at the turn of the 1950s and then carrying into the 1950s, as well as, of course, a fear of espionage, the infamous case of the Rosenbergs, and, of course, the witch hunting campaigns of the junior Senator Joseph McCarthy, as well as similar actions by a young member of the House of Representatives named Richard Nixon, during the House Un-American Activities Committee investigations. These events at the end of the 1940s, carrying into the 1950s, really sowed the seeds for an American society that was transformed by the concern of the potentiality of a third world war, and particularly a nuclear war. The Cold War tensions really transformed American society. And of course, the image you're seeing here is an artistic depiction of an American family that has constructed and is preparing to take shelter in a fallout shelter, a shelter built for the purposes of sustaining a nuclear war. In the 1950s, the prepper movement, as it's sometimes called, the 1950s was really sort of the emergence of the pop culture sort of interest in prepping for a massive calamity such as this. And so during the 1950s, the building of air raid fallout shelters became really relatively commonplace, as did the activity of prepping for a nuclear war, and you'll see this in the readings this week. The readings this week, we have two readings. One comes from the book Homeward Bound by Elaine Tyler May, and the other comes from Beth Bailey, who probably most well known for a book called Sex in the Heartland. And this chapter that she wrote is about the so-called sexual revolution that begins the late 1950s into the 1960s. And so we're going to be doing really an exercise this week. We'll have a degraded discussion this week. And I want you to really not only look at the thesis and the argument of Elaine Tyler May's reading and Beth Bailey's reading. I also want to see you connect the two. And of course, upcoming in the class, this is an exercise that I think is very important, because this is something we want to do on our exams, right? So in a few weeks, we'll have our second exam. And following this week, we're going to be looking at the Vietnam War for a couple of weeks, and we'll be reading the Kramer book, The Republic of Rock. And so it's important to remember that when we write those essay exams, it's really important. We're not simply writing about the primary reader or any of the other readings. We need to connect them. Now, you don't have to connect all of the readings, but what I'm looking for is for a paper that is sort of grounded and founded in the main reader. In the next case, it'll be the Kramer book, but then draws connections to create a central thesis, a central theme that sort of connects not only the main reader, but connects it to some of the other readings in this test section. So the Patterson readings, of course, and obviously this week's reading. So I want to see us connect these two articles, these two essays this week. I want us to be able to explain the positions of the authors, and then, of course, and you'll see all of this in the prompt for the discussion this week, and then of course, connect them, connect the readings, find a central theme, if you will. This week, both authors are looking at the 1950s and also looking at how the 1950s effectively sets up change in the 1960s. So you have to kind of read between the lines on that. Beth Bailey gets more into the 1960s, but really looking at how the 1950s changes American society. The Cold War changes American society in the 1950s in really fundamental ways, but then how that also sort of sets up even further change in the 1960s. All right, so this week, the factoid for this week is going to be in the extra credit discussion area. And I'm going to put a song in there, and the song is actually referenced in Elaine Tyler May's reading, and I want you to listen to the song. It's not a long song. It's an example of a rendition of an early age of rock and roll music by Bill Haley and the Comets. Some of you might know Bill Haley and the Comets. Maybe some of you, maybe your parents remembered the show Happy Days. The song Rock Around the Clock, that's Bill Haley and the Comets. Well, this is a song from Bill Haley and the Comets that's not as well known, but sort of speaks to the sort of effect that the Cold War and the fear of nuclear war had on American society coming through the lens of pop music. So I want you to listen to that song, and I want you to kind of summarize what that song's about in the extra credit discussion forum. I'll see everyone in the discussion forum this week. Please let me know if you have any questions. We'll have our next exam coming up in a few weeks. We'll be reading Kramer for the next couple of weeks before we take that exam, and then, of course, our major essay towards the end of the term. So please let me know if you have any questions, and let's have a great week.